Welcome to Rhema Words of Faith, Daily Bread Devotionals. Today, we're reflecting on a beautiful and encouraging verse from Isaiah 40 verse 29, which says, "He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak." This verse speaks directly to our hearts, especially when we're feeling drained, tired, or overwhelmed by life. It's easy to feel like we're running on empty, facing challenges that seem too big to handle. But this verse is a promise from God, offering us strength and power when we need it most. God doesn't expect us to have it all together on our own. He knows that we get weary, and He promises to give us the strength we need to press on. No matter where you are today, whether you're exhausted emotionally, physically, or spiritually, God is ready to renew your strength. Today, we'll dive deeper into what this promise means, how we can rely on God's strength in our lives, and how His power can lift us up when we feel weak. Let this verse encourage you to lean into God for the strength that only He can provide. Isaiah 40 verse 29 begins by saying, "He gives strength to the weary." We all know what it feels like to be weary. Whether it's the exhaustion of a long day, the mental toll of constant worry, or the emotional strain of difficult circumstances. Weariness is part of life, and it can leave us feeling drained, hopeless, and discouraged. The good news is that God is aware of our weariness. He doesn't look at us with disappointment or frustration when we're feeling tired or weak. Instead, He offers us His strength. In fact, He invites us to come to Him when we are weary and burdened, promising rest and renewal. When we're tired, it's easy to think we should just keep pushing through on our own. But God calls us to bring our tiredness to Him. When we do, He promises to give us strength, not just a quick fix, but the deep, lasting strength that can carry us through the toughest of times. If you're feeling weary today, remember that God is waiting to pour His strength into you, helping you find rest and renewal in His presence. Isaiah 40 verse 29 goes on to say, "He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak." This is a powerful promise from God, offering not just strength, but an increase in power for those who are weak. It's not uncommon for us to feel weak in different areas of our lives. Maybe you feel weak in your ability to handle the pressures of life, or you feel spiritually drained, struggling to keep up with your faith. The truth is, we all experience moments of weakness, but God promises that He will increase our power in those times. When we come to Him in our weakness, He doesn't leave us where we are. He fills us with His power. This isn't about us trying harder or being stronger on our own. It's about God's strength being poured into us, allowing us to rise above our circumstances. His power is made perfect in our weakness, and when we acknowledge our limitations, He can do His greatest work in and through us. This promise of increased power is not just for a moment of crisis, but for everyday life. As we lean on God, His power transforms us, making us stronger than we could ever be on our own. Where does this strength come from? Isaiah 40 verse 29 makes it clear that the strength and power we receive are from God Himself. It's easy to look for strength in the wrong places. We might try to find strength in external things like caffeine, distractions, or the approval of others. But those sources are temporary and will eventually leave us empty. True, lasting strength comes from God alone. When we turn to Him, He fills us with His infinite power and love, strengthening us from the inside out. God's strength is not just physical but spiritual, emotional, and mental. His strength renews our hearts and minds, helping us to face challenges with confidence. In times of exhaustion, we can trust that God will meet us exactly where we are, providing the strength we need. The more we lean into Him, the more we discover that His strength never runs out. He is a never-ending well of power and peace, and when we draw from Him, we never run dry. Whatever you're facing today, know that the strength you need is found in God, and He is always ready to supply it. So how do we receive this strength that Isaiah 40 verse 29 promises? The first step is acknowledging our weariness and weakness. God's strength is most powerfully experienced when we come to Him humbly, admitting that we can't do it on our own. It's when we release control and surrender our burdens to Him that His strength becomes evident. This doesn't mean we won't still face difficult situations or challenges. It means that in the middle of those challenges, we have a source of strength that enables us to keep going. One practical way to receive God's strength is through prayer. When we pray, we are inviting God to fill us with His power, peace, and endurance. We can also receive God's strength through His Word. The Bible is full of promises and encouragement that can lift our spirits and remind us of His faithfulness. Spending time in God's presence, whether through prayer, worship, or quiet reflection, is key to receiving His strength. And finally, we receive God's strength through community. Sometimes God strengthens us through the support and prayers of others. When we're feeling weak, reaching out to fellow believers for support can help us tap into God's strength in ways we might not expect. When we turn to God in these ways, we can trust that He will always meet us with the strength we need. Isaiah 40 verse 29 reminds us that God gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. When we acknowledge our weaknesses, we create space for God's strength to work in us. Our natural tendency is to rely on our own abilities, to push through challenges by sheer willpower. But true strength, according to the Bible, comes from recognizing our limitations and depending on God. God delights in showing His power through our weakness because it demonstrates His glory, not ours. The Apostle Paul experienced this firsthand when he said, "But He said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me.'" When we admit we are weak, God's power is free to fill us, making us stronger than we ever could be on our own. This is a paradox of the Christian faith. Our weakness becomes the opportunity for God's power to shine brightest. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, instead of trying to handle everything by yourself, take a step back and let God be your strength. He specializes in turning weakness into victory. One of the most amazing things about God's strength, as described in Isaiah 40 verse 29, is that it is always available to us. Unlike our own energy, which can run out, God's strength is limitless. It doesn't fade, and it doesn't have an expiration date. When we call on God, He doesn't just give us temporary strength to get through a particular moment. He gives us His eternal, infinite strength. The promise of God's strength is not conditional on our circumstances or our ability to maintain our own endurance. Whether we are facing a short-term challenge or a long-term trial, God's strength is ever present, always sufficient for the task at hand. This is a reminder that we are not expected to rely on our own resources or to tough it out alone. God's strength is an unending supply that is always ready for us to draw from. So when life feels heavy and we don't know how we'll keep going, we can find comfort in the fact that God's strength will never run dry. He will always give us what we need when we need it. Isaiah 40 verse 29 speaks of God increasing the power of the weak. This is more than just a temporary fix. It's a revival of strength that renews us from the inside out. When we come to God weary, feeling exhausted by the burdens of life, He doesn't just help us keep going. He revives us, refreshing our spirit, mind, and body. God's strength isn't just about survival. It's about restoration. When we turn to God for help, He doesn't just get us through the day. He gives us the energy, vision, and hope to rise above the challenges we face. The Bible tells us that God restores our soul. And this revival isn't just about physical rest, but about being spiritually and emotionally renewed. This revival power doesn't just come from reading a quick devotional or saying a quick prayer. It's a deep, life-changing encounter with God's presence. In these moments, God breathes new life into us, reminding us of His promises and His ability to restore what we thought was lost. When we allow God's strength to revive us, we are empowered not just to survive, but to thrive in the face of challenges. Isaiah 40 verse 29 teaches us that God gives strength to the weary. But how do we access that strength? The key is to wait on God. Isaiah 40 verse 31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength." This process of waiting on God is not passive. It is an active, intentional seeking of God's presence and help. When we wait on God, we are choosing to trust in His timing and His provision. Waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. It means relying on God rather than our own efforts. It's about surrendering our need to control and trusting that God will provide what we need when we need it. In a culture where we are constantly encouraged to move faster, to accomplish more, and to take charge of every situation, waiting on God can feel counterintuitive. But in waiting, we find the strength to continue. It's in those quiet moments of trusting God and surrendering to His will that we are replenished and restored. If you're feeling weak today, take time to wait on God. Let go of your need to do everything on your own and let Him renew your strength. The promise of Isaiah 40 verse 29 is that God will give you the power to keep going when you turn to Him. Isaiah 40 verse 29 reminds us that God is the source of our strength, and He is always ready to give it to us. In our fast-paced lives, it's easy to forget to pause and lean into God for His power. But when we remember that He is our strength and refuge, we can face any challenge with confidence. No matter how weak or weary we may feel, God's strength is available to us at any moment. As you reflect on this promise today, take a moment to rest in God's presence and trust that He will renew your strength. Let this truth empower you to live boldly and with hope, knowing that you do not walk this journey alone. If this message has encouraged you, please like, comment, and share this video with someone who may need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more uplifting messages that will encourage and strengthen you. Remember, with God's strength, you are capable of overcoming anything that comes your way. Keep trusting in His power to renew and revive you every day.